Hey everybody, my name is Rory Heaney. I am a lead front-end developer at C Digital Labs down in Southern California, but I'm based here in Oregon. And today we're going to go over the inspector. I'm going to focus primarily in Chrome, almost exclusively. Uh, what we'll see essentially, I'll be working on Windows, but this will parity with Mac essentially, so it shouldn't be an issue. And during this, I'm kind of going to go through tab by tab, part by part. We're going to do kind of a wide net, just briefly touch on things, and it really should give you what you need to dive further if you needed to, and ideally give you all the tools you'll need to see what's going on. Whether those become errors, or you're trying to change something on the fly, or you just want to see where your resources are coming from, if there's any AJAX requests and stuff like that. In terms of questions, I'm going to do a little pause between each thing. If there is something that someone has while I'm doing something or wants to review it, please go ahead, give me a shout out. We can sit on that for a second and move forward.
All right.
Sweet. All right.
Yep.
You guys ready? Let's do it.
Yeah. You can go ahead and share your screen then.
Sweet. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep. You got it.
Awesome. Now here we're using Chrome. I'm using the inspector. If you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command Option I. If you're on Windows, you can just Control Shift I and it'll open up. And of course, the good old right click and then hit inspect will give you what you need. At the very top of the screen, we're just going to go over a brief overview of what's going on here. Whenever it opens up, you're always going to start on elements. Of course, without going too far into it, this is just what makes up the web page and how you can actually go through bit by bit and select everything. Also, you'll have an option next to elements to have an arrow. And this arrow will be able to select any of these. So we're going to select this. And it's great because you can do that and not trigger a click event. And in this example, we can see in their header, when we grab the SVG is not just that, but it's inside an href, which is inside a figure, which is inside a header. So it can help you nail down where items are. You notice if we right click on something, more attributes show up. So we can add an attribute, edit the HTML, duplicate the element. We'll just keep adding logos. And now we have 4 logos up on the screen. Let's go ahead and delete some of those, just the delete key. I'm going to right click again. We can, of course, cut, copy. Think of it like Photoshop or Word. We can hide the element, force a state, for example, active, hover, focus. And when we think of these states, these are really your mouse interactivity. And of course, these applies to mobile, but we're going to focus on this for now. So if I go hover, there's a state right here. Notice the color changes as we hover over items. These change. There's a background color for the about. Let's inspect it. You can have the button, the LI. Let's come here, force state. Let's do force the hover state. And now you can see wherever we go, this is forcing the hover state. Keep going with actions. We have breaks. This would normally go for when you're really debugging something. Let's say it's a single page application and we want to stop the page on this particular field before the rest of the page renders. We could do that. And then we go on expand recursively. This you almost will never use this. I've never actually needed to use it, but it would just, let's say we can then take it through it and then it would open up what's in here. Just kind of went through it. Typically you don't do this depending on the element. But it is because you can just open it up. But if you want, you could do that. Of course, scroll into view, focus, and more. As we go up through the page, we just go through the rest of the HTML, then back up. So besides here, the elements page, we can also, let's grab something. Let's grab this SVG. And then we can focus right there on focus. but where the fun comes in, and you guys probably, well, before we go on to console, is there any question on elements? Go with no. So we'll keep going. All the fun here is the console section. Let's refresh the page. Oh, and as we can already see, two issues. We click on them here and we get more info. I'll close this again, but here we are. So this is an issue in yellow. Yellow is just a warning. Nothing to ever like truly be concerned about. It's more so these are coming from in here. It's analytics, so you know something's going to change. You'll get a lot of these from Chrome extensions. Um, there is potential knowledge here, and you'll see them in like CSS standards or even JavaScript. Hints will come here, but you'll seldom see that. It's typically an older framework. Things will be deprecated. What you'll typically be on the lookout when you're in here is these errors. Errors are in red. And apparently on WordPress.org, their GPC JSON file for their whether they will honor tracking or not is missing. So that's a bummer. Let's click this. Network shows the 404. Let's just copy it because we're in here. So let's change that. Yep. So we're missing that file, and we try to get it again. You'll also see things here. So in this, it's a script error, it appears to be. We can click on that script and ideally get additional details. Now, from the console, if you click on a script, you'll then dive into potentially where their problem is. So you would be able to show your developer this in the code to help them debug it. But before we go back to that, let's stick in console for a bit. Console is great because a lot of things can happen here. If we enter the console itself, right now we're in the console. And here a lot of things can be done. You can add JavaScript to change things on the page. If you want to see something on the fly, for example, let's take heading. Let's go back to the console. So we could, let's say, jQuery. Oh, enter in the class name, which was WP block heading. Hide. Oh, jQuery isn't defined on the site. So technically, we could then use, which is great because this actually showed us another thing. So jQuery is not included, or another library you're trying to use. Often there'll be things like you'll say you can install a plugin, right? And you just drag it over your desktop, and for some reason, you were grabbing one of the files and you're missing something. Let's say that was like Flex Slider, BX Slider, Royal Slider, or anyone on the planet. Often we'll see things here that could relate to those. Or you'll see it in forms. Often, one thing you'll get around is if you add a form plugin. So let's say like Gravity Forms. And if you don't check to add the JavaScript to the footer, depending on the theme, we could see something in here saying Gravity Forms is not defined. Let's just keep going. We have all these things on the page, which is great. Are there any questions on the console before we keep going here? Nope.
I'll have one.
Yes, I had a. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marianne.
Um, I've been listening to this. I have never used the console before. I use this primarily for CSS. So I'm looking at this and I do have a question. Why are there warnings when it's on, a WordPress.org site? Why would there be any or warnings? Why wouldn't it just be perfect?
So this will come from so many, many things. We could go and just for, argument's sake, let's go to someone they're having a great time with. Um,
Of course, well, perfect.
so even here, we could see there's warnings here. So there's a graph tag that already exists. Chrome is moving towards an experience. So see all these things right here, all of these. These are primarily, which happens a lot in things like Chrome or Firefox or anything you're going to use an extension for. These warnings, especially all of these, none of this is coming from WP Engine. This is all coming from your extensions, or in this case, my extensions. And in here,
Okay.
and this particular one, Chrome is saying, hey, we're doing all this stuff with cookies. This is how we're going to handle it in the future. So it's very seldom where you will benefit from this information, but that's not always true. Here they have something going on where this could be a third-party thing, and then again, the script has these things going on and these warnings that this node, so they're hitting probably an ID of an element or another particular element that's supposed to be unique, and they're already letting you know it exists. So these, third more than often than not, these are from third-party libraries. Or in the other case, it was Google Analytics. This is actually nothing to do with them themselves.
Okay.
Oh, so I had a question, two questions, I'm sorry.
No problem.
The smaller one, and the first one is, why did you force the SVG in the beginning? And you were going to show something about that. I lost the transition, if you will, the transitional information of why that was done, and then we moved on over into console. And the second question is, from what you're showing on these warnings and stuff, should we disable as just a plan of usage? If we're going to inspect elements, should we be disabling most of our extensions? It seems like if what you're saying is our extensions are going to be filling up the analytics of this console with all kinds of warnings.
So let's go back to your first question real quick as we're in the console currently. So here, when you click on an element, whether it be the logo or anything, and you right click, there's an option to duplicate it. So let's say you just wanted to build columns very quickly and see how they might look, and you built one. You could then highlight it, duplicate element, and be like, oh, this would look like if this was doubled on the screen. It's more so for recognizing space between elements, what it looked like. We just threw that up there. You'll seldom use it, but it's something that can help in just an obscure way. For the console, that's where we're going next, and that was a good question. So here, if we go to issues, we can go over what we want to show and hide. Let's get rid of what's new. Let's get rid of search, little issues. So we can group by kind, can include or not include the console itself. Get out here. So we want to include. So in terms of warnings though, I would never actually hide them, because they can come from this or JavaScript that browser is now allowing, or it could give you a warning that this is a bleeding edge version. Let's say if you're bleeding edge version of Chrome, this often than not, you're not going to get a lot of this. This is for the most part, you won't get a ton of, and it really won't take up a ton of the space.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering if I do this with too many extensions loaded, if it were to be make it complicated or problematic.
Oh, no, not at all. And of course, in the end, you can always, if you wanted to hide, let's say you did for some reason, there's just like a wave, and you're like, oh my gosh. In this toggle bar, you have the option to show everything, just warnings, just errors, and from there. So you could filter it out if you chose to. Let's say it was just too much.
Thank you.
No problem. Sweet. Let's keep going. So part of the console when we're here, we just showed showing and hiding. Some nifty things that come here as well. Let's go to, we can always clear them. Let's say you need to for any reason. We'll refresh. Console errors will show back automatically. This Issues tab, it just gives you more information. Not all of this is often what you need. It'll present you things it believes are important and how you might be able to resolve them. Here's it's about their content security policy and how they couldn't find it. The script was blocked. Google Analytics, this is the change they're making, so this didn't even involve you. It can give you more details. Let's go back to the console. We were going to execute some jQuery in there, but they're not supporting it. So let's just use some inline.js. And so we do that, and then we showed it. So then let's change this to that. And now it's showing again. You won't often do this, but let's say the argument for this case is to running inline JavaScript or jQuery is you maybe not have access to the code, you're on the fly, it could be you haven't pulled out a repo or you're not opening the theme. Or you just saw something you're just doing it on the fly. You're like, well, what if I just did this? What if we tried that? The console, you can do awesome things with JavaScript and jQuery. Basically anything, excuse me, that you would run in your code, you could do here. So in vanilla JavaScript, if we targeted the heading and then added an inline style of display none, now that disappears. Let's remove that inline style. It's nice. If we select this, see its font size, what it is has right here. Let's go to the console, close that. We're going to clear it, run it again so we don't clog up the screen. And now we have an inline style of none. We've added with JavaScript. Of course, you probably won't do that much, but the point is the option that you can. And if you are using JavaScript, jQuery, or even any other library that's already on your project, that could be Ajax requests, and then outputting content. It really is a powerful tool on the fly. But it's more so you're not always going to need it. And of course, this time you would never need to do that in a particular thing because we could just come up here and change the style. From the console, we're about to move back to styles, actually. Any questions before we move on?
Yes, I did have one more question.
Yeah.
When you do this, is it actually updating the site and saving, or is this just
This is
is this
all on the fly. None of this is actually happening except for in this controlled instance. So any site you do this to, that's funny because that has totally come up before and still does. What are you doing to the website? Absolutely nothing. This is just in this instance. This doesn't exist. We could all go to WordPress.org right now, and we could just say, "This is Rory Press now." This is my fork. That's not real. But that's the best part about it, and it's always something to know that this is always. Let's say you're debugging, which is a great question you had, and you make a bunch of other edits. And like, oh, you messed it up, it went too far, which can happen more than not. You're deleting elements, you're changing styles, and I'm like, oh, it's as soon as you hit refresh, clean slate.
Thanks.
No problem. Now, from the console, since we were checking out how we can change things with JavaScript, we came back and we saw that there was an inline style applied. Now, if you guys also noticed, when we go to here and see the inline styles, we get everything else here on the right. So, and of course, there's a lot going on here. And most browsers will look exactly the same to this, more or less. They'll be a little bit different, whether it be Safari, Firefox, Edge. And of course, Edge is just Chromium, and so it's almost a duplicate of Chrome, so it'll be very similar. But we'll start from the top. In the top, we have these tabs. styles, computed, layout, event listeners. Let's start with styles. Styles from the top, we'll start with element style. Element style means that this is basically in line. Notice if we come down to this element, we see it right here, style, font size 70. And that reflects that this is here. In terms of importance, sometimes we're wondering, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be font 50. What the heck is going on here? So let's say if we, go here, tab, that gives us a new line. Say font size 50 pixels. Oh, but this is in my style sheet. What's going on here? Well, it's letting you know that there's something overriding this. That's why this is crossed out. That could be a media query. That could be an inline style. It could be an important tag. Here we've seen that element style. This has an inline style. It lets us know right away that this element has something set in line. And from here, just like we saw with JavaScript, we can also keep changing it. And then of course, we can then toggle these off. We're back on. And then if you do in Windows in this case, so I'm doing Control Z, where it's now taking us back through the edits I made. Convenient. And then from element style, it continues to go down. From element, we see root, from root, and then it's the top level styles accordingly. So for here, in their style sheet, if we click on that, this will be minified. So, it's coming down for their map, which is great. So it shows us where their styles are coming from. And then go back to elements. Then, so this was, take us here. And now we have been transported to the sources tab. That's where we currently are. And we'll get to that in a second. But right now we're still on elements. And as we go down, you'll see what's the global styling. So what's inherits, border box, H1, and so forth. And now these are where it's inherited from. And it just kind of keeps going. And of course here, as we saw before, we can adjust anything as we need to. Any questions before we go over to these sections under styles?
Yeah, Rory, can you talk a little bit about the specificity of some of these classes and how things get overridden or not?
Yeah, of course. So when we were touching on that with element style, here in terms of specificity, that also comes down to the same thing again. Element style is going to override root. Root will override element. And this is just at the base level. So then once we get to elements, we could then have elements with classes. So in this argument, I'm going to click this plus sign, and that's going to target H1 WP block heading. I'm going to go to color red. And because we're targeting that, it's going to overwrite it. But let's watch what happens when I delete this. As this is a new class, technically speaking, in your style sheet. Even though I'm adding this here, technically speaking, since I created this class, if we added it to their style sheet, and we could actually do that, it was at the top, it would still not be red because it wasn't in order. Here, we'll see in order what has priority and why. And that comes down again to element, root, and do those elements that have classes and immediate queries. So if we click on this paragraph tag, it has a class of isStyle short text. isStyle short text has predefined line height, pulling from its root then, and then the style. So then if we can also see if we uncheck this, the line height changes. So your class selection or your styles that come out on the right side will always be in order of importance. And what is taking priority over everything else that's there.
I have a question. I have a question again. I'm sorry
No
to
problem.
be
Fire away.
the chatterbox here. Um, if you are debugging or changing aesthetics this particular way on the web page, and it seems to be very dynamic, and it doesn't change the actual website, but you want to save these particular changes or export them. How do you? Oh, okay. How do you do that? What are you clicking on?
So here, there are ways to do it, and there's a way to copy all the styles. In this way, in my opinion, what you would do is let's go ahead and update. So this would be in our styles. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna hit tab. I'm gonna tab again. I have a new style. I'm just gonna say font size 20 pixels, color blue, and now we were here. Really, you could just select it, right click, and copy it. We can also copy all the CSS changes. So if we, well, it's not printing out, it's a bummer. But yeah, you would just come in here, select it all, copy it, and you then paste this into your CSS or your CSS working file or the editor in that example, I guess. But part of your question though, this will not save, of course. So if we refresh the screen and we're like, oh, we did all this work, oh, it's gone. So that is something to keep in mind. It's very easy to be editing on the fly. Oh, this is great. And then next thing you know, you forgot to copy and paste, and now it's gone. So just something to be mindful of. Sweet. All right, let's keep going. Oh, as we go down, we then see there's other stuff. We can set hover, add new classes, add a new style rule. We can toggle color schemas, like if there's a dark mode on the site, for example. And then this just brings out the computed and layout section, which you typically won't do as that's a lot of columns, or if that's your style, that's okay too. But in this case, let's go ahead and refresh. Let's pick this button and let's go to hover. Now here, hover, it wasn't always hover in the browser, but it is now, which is deceiving. Because it's more than that. You can force this element to be like, oh, show me the active state. Show me the focus state. The color change slightly. Let's make that a bit more dramatic. Let's collect that. Background color, red. We uncheck the focus state. Now it's gone. Focus state is back. Great. Oh, you guys, the red was all wrong. It needed to be blue. Not a problem. Color, white. And now we have new styles for that. This is great. Let's turn that off. Hover state. There we go. Focus within, target, focus visible. The outline now appears. So this is a great way to see that your styles are working without doing certain things. Because of course you can hover, but now you're like, oh, right click, inspect. The hover's gone. I've seen many people who go to debug their own project or they're trying to show you CSS that's changing. I'm like, no, I swear it happens. But I click on it and I can't show it. Happens all the time. A little deceiving, but always remember it's this hover tab under styles. This will toggle it open and close. And now we'll click on it again. The focus state has been triggered. All of this now updates to its level of importance and where its position is in the style sheet. And in this example, which is a great one, so there's more than one section of elements using this exact thing. And this is letting you know that this is the current one that's being used. This element exactly is being targeted. And these are the styles being applied to it. This will be great, especially in terms of really when you're testing your own accessibility. Checking for underlines is a big one. So let's go through here. Let's tab through. So if we see an outline on that button, let's go back. There's an outline on this text, on this link, I mean, an outline right here. Let's go ahead and inspect it. We selected it, that's the href. Let's do focus. Focus visible. There we go. That's where it's being used. These are the styles that are being applied. Text stays right and underlined. And you can now change that accordingly. Or you can be like, hey, I've added hover, focus, focus visible. I'm not seeing any styles. Let's just do outline none. And like, oh, we've added all these states. What's going on here? Now you know that something's missing in that particular style effect. Any questions on the hover states?
I just want to say that I've used that a lot
Yeah.
in designing websites, and even in the new WordPress where you have the design system and you can just push some buttons and you get all the design you want. And I still don't think it's hover and it's active, or they're not working.
Mhm.
you
Sure.
have you still have to do the CSS on that. I should also say there's been many times I made it change in this in the inspector tool, and I copied that and I went to my CSS file and put it in, and nothing happened.
No.
And you have to, sometimes I really have to hunt for the elements. It's not always clear.
Absolutely. And that's a great point because you can be in somewhere. It's so easy to grab this, but when you focus in on it, I now grab the span just by changing where I was pointing exactly. The site, it does have smaller text, even though it is still compliant. And it's easy to grab the span and be like, oh, I meant to grab the button. And sometimes people will definitely get frustrated thinking they're constantly here. And like, no, where's the background color on this span? Where is this? So it's very easy to get lost in the elements.
Right. I've also found a little trick is to sometimes compare Chrome with Firefox in the inspection tool. And sometimes Firefox shows me what I was missing
Sure.
in Chrome, and I'm able to fix it on my CSS file on the website. So that's just a little trick. There's more than one inspection tool. Use as many as you feel like.
So from browser to browser, there's inspection tool differences
Yes.
when you concern elements and styles and things like that.
Mhm.
Right. They all tell you essentially the same thing, but they may say it in a slightly different way. Does that make sense, Rory?
Mhm. A good example of that would be, let's so see here on Chrome, I'm on this element, this button element for the nav. As I go through here, there isn't a direct option to see its accessible value, uh, versus that's actually right here under these two arrows to go onto more, under accessibility. In Firefox, if you right click on that same element, you'll actually get an option to see its accessible value from the drop down. So it's going to be more the same, just in a different spot sometimes. The main stuff will always be in the same areas. But in that example, as in Chrome right now, the option to inspect that accessible value that's here isn't here. We have to go over to this top bar, go, accessibility. And now we can see this. So still easy to get to, no problem. It's just in a different spot. Sweet. Let's keep going. From the hover state, we have element classes. So basically, we're going to select an element, any element, and we can add a new class to it. So really, we would do this. This would assume you already have your own predefined styles, what you're using. I'm going to right click on extend. I'm going to grab this block heading class. I'm going to go back to about, right click it, and we're going to add a new class. And we're going to add the block heading class to the span. So now it's here. It would technically inherit that style, but That class doesn't do anything to the span. So nothing's going to happen here. But let's say you're using any type of framework, Bootstrap, Foundation, any one of them all, material. You could then use that to then move the classes around. Let's go to, for example, go to Bootstrap 5, come here. Let's make sure we're on the latest version. Let's go to an element. Let's find a column, containers. And it should show us a container. Let's go grid. There we go. So we have rows and columns. We can come here. We're going to inspect the element. There is a row. We're going to go to class. We're going to call this call. And now, I'm not sure if you saw it, but the padding on this just changed on this element right here because we added the class. I can delete it. And of course, we can keep going. And using a space separator, you can then keep adding class after class. This would be more something you're moving on the fly, you kind of know what you're doing, what you're using already, and like, oh, what if, this column now had a spacing to the right? Just like the element, what is it? ES0 would be padding left 0. So let's do padding 5, and it gets shot over a little bit because we increase the padding. So this is more so you're editing the element and adding classes to it. Of course, if we delete it, that element then resets. So it's really nice to do this on the fly when you're editing something. It more so, of course, only comes in handy when you're working on something that you already have kind of laid out, or if you just want to test something, you do it then too. But that's using the class feature. From there, we have a new style rule. So it's taking its current class, and we can add more styles to it, just like we were doing before. We could turn off modes, and then this column right here, this slide up, will actually be for this next tab. We're going to click on computed. And something that's really nice about this that people don't really understand to use a lot of when you're working on spacing or how an element is defined is this in this computed section. So here we're getting the actual what's going on with the element. Here's the column text, how much padding this has, the border being set, and its margin, which is 0. If we look on here, we'll select this padding and come down and see these are the values that are right here. That's the value that's right here. So let's go ahead and update this. Let's make the padding bottom bigger. Let's go back to here to the layout. And you've noticed now it's increased 44 pixels. This can help a lot when people get tripped up over numbers. I'm like, no, you could have margin set, totally forgot. And now you're clicking the element, you're not noticing, you're like, what's going on? And this can kind of give you an idea of this container, what's inside of it, its padding, it's what it is, and it's kind of like a visual outline representation of what's going on. So typically use this for debugging. You won't need to use this often, but it can help when it comes to spacing. You're like, what the heck? Is this padding? What's going on? And it's clearly defined right here. Underneath that, we have computed properties. All right, now what's a computed property? So this is just the final CSS output because there's so many ways to write CSS. Let's go back to styles. And we notice here I increased this. It was 0.7 rem, 0.75 rem beforehand. We increase it to 1, 2. Remember, these are values, but not straight pixels, but they can compute to that. So let's say you're like, well, we wanted to enter it pixels for whatever reason, X, Y, and Z. We can go to computed. Like, oh, padding bottom is now 44 pixels. Great. And also again, right here up top. And the values accordingly. So for everything part of it, here is its final value. This can help when you're trying to understand, let's say someone's doing a system font, or you're using theme styles and you set your classes and your font sizes in WordPress, and now you're like, oh, it just reads dash dash value this that, and that's what does that compute to? Well, we can click on the element, go to its styles and computed tab, and see what's actually going on. This helps a lot if you need to get a value. This could be here, the RGB colors, the actual font size, the widths. Things with widths, keep in mind. Now, these are fluid components. This is using FlexGrid. So these widths, this actually isn't set right here. It's just letting you know that in this instance, when we open the browser and we're showing it, this is its value. Any questions on computed styles? Great. Layout, this is most just shows you, so we can come here, we can then turn this over, and this is kind of us giving us the lid, not the lid, but the grid of the area, what's going on. You won't always need to do this, and you seldom do, but this would come in handy, and it comes in handy a lot for Flexbox. It does too, but when you start using the CSS grid, because when you start using the CSS grid, you can really start to create amazing layouts using values. A column goes up, one goes down, while the other spans across, and it makes almost this mosaic that you created on your own without masonry. This will come in handy a lot, because then this will map out where the elements are and show you this is their container, this is their grid. This comes in handy a lot when you start using the CSS grid. Flexbox, it helps, but this is more so for, I would suggest, the CSS grid in my opinion. And you use that when doing this. But that's for, you're really trying to push CSS layouts as far as you can. Event listeners, this is letting know what our click handlers are. You typically won't do this a ton. I do think this is great though for single page applications, and you can see kind of what's going on. But for the most part, you won't be in here much. Something that is great is accessibility tab. This is huge. Let's actually go back to the WordPress site for this example. So we have a header, a figure, and an SVG, right? Well, this SVG has a title. Great. So under here, click on the element, accessibility. We can start to read all of this. Let's close these, close these. So this lets us know what it is. Has a link. There's an image. It's titled wordpress.org. We can see the title right here. It's shown in this attribute. This SVG has a role of image. So here, this is great because you'll see this on other things too. And this should be, we consider more so for accessibility and interactivity. So we see this SVG. Now, an SVG can be so many things. An SVG can be a map. An SVG can be an image. Or in here, we're doing this is an image that also contains text, and it's just for the title for accessibility. But it's let us know that this SVG is serving as an image. I'll use an SVG because those are super dynamic and can basically infinitely grow or shrink as needed. So it makes a lot of sense to put on a site for a logo. But let's say for some reason, and you wouldn't want to do this, but you could. Let's say this was a span, and the span had a background image, and it was the WordPress logo. And you would then give the span a role of image, and technically saying, for accessibility purposes, as you scan the page, like a screen reader, for example, would pick that span up with the role of image as an image. I would suggest coming to this tab a lot if you're changing up content on a page or you're curious what's going on, you think something isn't correct. This accessibility tab is awesome for letting you know what is going to be conveyed to the user. We're starting to really pick up steam here. Any questions, comments before we keep going? Sweet. So far, we've been through elements and the console. Kind of touching on things briefly. Um, Based on the time, let's go ahead and we'll go back one, and we're going to toggle the device editor. So here, which is great, this will give us a responsive setup, which we can then choose from stuff that's predefined or things that you add on your own. Now, this is going to do its best as it can to emulate clicks as if they're mouse taps. So, for example, of course, it'd be an active state. Hover states will come across active states as well. But, this is a drag and drop. Not drag and drop, but drag, scroll, going and forth. We can then pick different sizes, or we can make our own. We can add and subtract devices. Chrome is nice. They have ton, a ton of devices preset for dimension-wise that you can check. It's really great. Of course, you don't have to use any of that. You could just create your own. Well, we want to touch on this, and of course, we have these different sizes. And then, of course, rotate. We click the responsive option. It's then kind of free reign. I think you'll use this responsive option if your design is more fluid versus container based. So it just kind of keeps there aren't exact container options like you would see in like Bootstrap where it's like max width is this and it's always that edge. Max width is this and that's edge slick gets smaller. This is great for kind of seeing like, oh, this isn't that great right here. Maybe we should make this column long, wider, shorter. What should we do here? That's your responsive tab. Any questions about your responsive tab? Sweet. There are other option here, but you're not going to use them a lot. I've used them very seldomly. You can choose throttling, basically like if you're on a lower end service or you only had so much of a connection, how that might show for them. These can help with that, but you really only not mess with it, use it if you're going truly performance driven. And then even here, it's always, nothing's going to be the same as real device testing, but this could help you kind of take some notes. Sweet. Let's go to the sources tab. Let's close out these. So sources is kind of where everything is, the files. This is what's available on the page. Here, let's say you can see, you're loading fonts. You can make sure they're coming in. These are the logos. More files, things that are just available ready that you could always, these things are already accessible on the page, are already linking to, we can already open them. But this is a way to organize the page structure of what's going on for the files themselves. Realistically, you'll seldom be in here. Networking tab. So this is a fun one. Let's go ahead and refresh. Let's click on all, refresh again. Right, so this is everything that's loading on the page. We have its name, its status, so 200 is success. 404, GPC isn't loading. The type, what initiated it, the size, and time it took to load. See memory cache. Let's do a hard refresh. Now there's no memory cache. So memory cache is letting you know when you see that. Let's do a refresh again. That it's browser memory. It's in here. This has already been loaded. It's going to load again much quicker now. But here's where you can see what's being loaded on the page. We have fonts, style sheets, JavaScript, images, more JavaScript. This is when it loaded, more JavaScript. more JavaScript, that missing uh, GPC file, and more JavaScript. And of course, we can filter, type it out, scroll to the top. Let's just type in Interlatin, and now we see everything that's loading up in that. As we go down the here, it's going to start to separate what's being loaded and not. You'll notice now that we're filtering it, nothing's loading, but sometimes people get caught, and I see this a lot, where you forgot to delete what you enter for search. Now, if it's a clear search again, these are all the CSS files on their own. The documents that were loaded, AJAX requests that are being made, JavaScript files, fonts, images, media. You get the point. In here, what you'll see, which can work out great, is an AJAX call will be made. So for example, on a site, let's say, it's not a website, let's do inspect, go to network. We're going to go to the AJAX option. Let's just clear it out. Let's type in a doctor name. And you can see an AJAX request was made. And then from there, we can look at its response, headers that were sent over. So if we go back to WordPress, network, let's go to here. So this is the request that was made, its language, the values that were sent, the response that came back. So they're probably doing something that on their end with the success. But this is great because you can come here, let's say you have a site, and an example would be a blog that has loading more, and that has a load more instead of regular pagination. So in here, if you're inspecting and you go to fetch, you'll see every request that happens here. And from there, you can see how it's being queried, depending on how it's done, of course, not always. Like if you're making a server-side call, you might not be passing those values on the front end. But here, they are. And just so its location, you can then view it as a straight URI or parsed. From here, from preview and response, you can then see what it's returning. So this will help a lot because let's say you make an AJAX request and it's loading blogs. Well, those blogs didn't load all the way. Let's go to, let's see, over here. Yeah, you guys good. Do you have any questions on this before we go past? Because a lot of stuff can happen here.
Just commenting it seems like this could involve an entire coursework.
It's so yes, it's funny because there's really you can really use some magical things in the inspector when you're debugging and trying to see what's going on, or you're monitoring a request, or you're blocking one. So it can, but the best part is once you've been exposed to it, it's hard to ask the question if you don't understand the question first. And now, ideally, after this, you'll be able to expand on those questions if you need to do something. So, for example, here, if we right click on this, we can block this URL. So we can say we don't want this to run. So let's say you would do this. This would be a great time to now you're making an AJAX request. Great, we're loading more posts. Oh, sweet. And you, someone who's testing the site in this example, what happens when the post fail? Well, we go to block request URL, and now and then try and run this again. And now we'll see, oh, well, nothing happened here. Where's our error message? So it's a great way to then make sure things were passed were fallen. Like we made a request. Do we have a success state? Yes, more blogs loaded. Well, what's our error state? Well, you can then click on that. Like, oh, we haven't defined one yet. So it does get more and more in it. We're not going to go into overwriting headers and things like that. But that would be it does get much more deeper into that. Sweet, let's keep rolling. We don't have to keep everyone here super late. Um, from here, we can of course preserve the logs, disable cache, the throttling again to kind of test the load speed. So let's do 3G. And then let's preserve the log and let's refresh the page. So, and this didn't really help. This didn't really take that much long. So you can assume it's well-defined site. It could be caching, but still, that's the way you can do it here. We could then turn off preserve log, but with preserve log turned on, you notice that everything just, so if you needed to maintain history, sometimes you'll see things and people run into this a lot. Let's clear it out. For example, you're filling out a form. And let's say that form doesn't AJAX load, it takes you to a new page. But there's an analytic event that's firing and you don't think it might be, and it's supposed to fire after you click submit. Hitting preserve log will then take where we're going from page to page. So then if we go to back to home and just keep going down the line, back to home again. So all of our previous things we did are all still here. This can be a great way to track interactivity or if interactivity is missing. So from networking, we have performance. This is kind of just a way to see what's going on, what the browser is estimated is going on. Where you'll actually use more of this is over in the Lighthouse option. So I don't want to harp too much on the performance section. Lighthouse is more important. Let's keep going down the line. Memory, honestly, you'll never use this in this thing. This would be more of a deep dive, so we're going to skip over that for now. Application. Here's something you will definitely use. Well, depending. Let's say you had a client that needed to add GPC to the site or a GPC plugin, and then you're constantly accepting the cookies. You're going to delete your cookies, but now you didn't mean to do them for every domain. Here on the page itself, under application, there's all these options. Under storage, so we have local storage for the domain, session storage for the domain, cookies for the domain. And let's say you hit GPC and you clicked all these things and you didn't want to delete cookies for other parts of your pages through history settings. That's okay. You can do that through the inspector. And this is great for testing all those plugins like that that are, blocking analytics, allowing analytics, and things like that. You can come here, right click, and then clear it. And now you don't have to go into your history to delete the cookies for that session. And then refresh, and everything just gets re-added automatically. This would be great for cookie banners and things like that to testing to make sure that cookies are being set. And then if you delete them, let's say you updated it, you still need to see that updated version. Well, here you can come in, delete your session for those pages or the page you're on, so you could re-trigger it. This actually comes in handy quite a bit. And you can also see, you'll often see, let's say, you're storing data you want to transfer across pages. Maybe your site's using local storage or session storage, so the window storage. You can track here where what values are being set and why. Any questions about here? This would be more so for tracking values and delete cookies, but still good info to have. For here, we're actually going to click on Lighthouse instead. We're going to come here, and here is really great stuff. We're going to refresh the page. You have all these options, and of course, you can do this online or the browser. And it can be subjective off your caching. You'll want to run it a few times just to make sure you have an average. But in a pinch for both performance and accessibility and all these others, it's nice to kind of get an overview of what you've been doing. So we're just going to click it for this example. It's going to run. And here we chose performance and we chose mobile. and it kind of gives us a report. Now, let's go back to the top. Here we have its potential performance rating, where that falls in, metrics, how long it takes for its first content to paint. We have showed how the page came together, what it thinks might be fixable. So Reddit wants you to take care of. These are warnings. These are for the most part not necessarily passing, but not really impacting. Now, even though this helps, it is something to take with a grain of salt. This could include so many other libraries. This could include also analytics. There's a lot that goes on here, but if you're looking to how to maybe speed things up, here's a great way to see what might be going on and where you could pick up some slack. We're going to refresh the page. Let's go to, and of course, from here, we can then export this report, which is super nice. Save the JSON for it. It really does good stuff. You can then clear it out with the X button. We can click on accessibility. And of course, you can do them all at once or just the one. Mobile, desktop, analyze page load. Lighthouse to do its thing. And this could be, let's say you built a project. Let's say you've had a developer work on it or another team. You could, oh, that's what we're talking about. This is a way for you to see like, hey, this is something we're trying to improve. I ran a Lighthouse report on my own website. What here do you think is, what do you think we can accomplish? And in terms of this list. So we come here, give us more details about what's going on, but it's a good way to get a report. I would always suggest using Lighthouse. It's a great tool. Any questions, comments, concerns so far? We are coming towards the tail end before we get into the real nitty-gritty stuff, which will probably be another session, but about what we have so far. Questions, comments, concerns?
Can you talk about, again, a specificity and how it kind of overrides? Sometimes you see a specific, a group and you go like, why is that being overridden? And this is one thing that, if you hover over that area there, you'll get that little specificity pop up.
So
you hover over the class, I believe, and you'll see it. It just hovers. It just hover over the actually on the right side, I think. And there you go.
Oh, that specificity. You were talking about class specificity. Gotcha. Okay. So
Yeah.
here, this is element, the classes for it. Really, what this comes down to, we'll come in here, is where it falls in here. So it's letting you know that there's a generic and then the two classes being used. Really, personally, in my opinion, I wouldn't always lean on this necessarily. Because even though it's showing you the specificity, what it really does is matters is the style sheet and then classes being used. So over here, let's come down, let's click on this again actually. So we can then do 10 pixels. A little short. Let's do 200 pixels. And now let's go back to the elements. So you see the specificity, even though this specificity hasn't changed, it's because of where it falls in the style sheet. So even though we're here, we have the exact same classes being called out, but it goes in order of importance from top to bottom. Bottom being, in this case, actually the most important. Top is where your kind of base styles would go. Here, we saw how we could kind of override that because now we added a new style to the bottom. In terms of other specificities, what people can get hung up on, and it's not shown here, but with IDs and classes. Your ID is going to go override your class. So let's go ahead and edit the HTML. We've added a test class ID. You notice when we add the style option, it now skips over the class because there's a div there. I mean an ID. Then we can add some color, red. Here, we know specificity changed greatly from that. But in the end, it's because of what you're going to learn here is that this one is going against the ID, and then from here, it was the elements 2, 1. If we get rid of this body tag, since that is gone, it's now got rid of that 1 that's going over the classes being used. If we get rid of here, and look at that, it's now a 1. So that's now a 1 because it's 1 class versus here it was 2 and that body element. So we hover over it again. No ID, 2 classes, generic element. Something to remember is that, of course, is now as you dive down for nested elements, the deeper you go in your specific classes in terms of nesting them, like right here, that will then override the styles. That's kind of like, I would say, I'll leave it at that because I don't want to make this a CSS lesson. But in terms of specificity, if I could learn to say the word, ID, classes, generic element. Anyone else? Sweet, guys. That would be essentially a quick, dirty intro to the inspector. This happened across all browsers, of course. If you are using Safari, you will have to enable developer tools to access it, but Firefox and Chrome will have it readily accessible right away. That's it for me.
Okay. This was great. I learned more than I thought. It's going to happen. It's just great.
All I've used it for, Rory, is the CSS. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea it did all of that. That's really great.
This is awesome.
This is
I
why
think
we got smart people in our group, so we can learn new things.
something that always helps, and honestly, you can always see it when you use someone else's web application. That could be for your bank or anything else. You can just open up the inspector, and you can see on a high level of how things are going on. It could be their AJAX requests. There's times where I've logged issues using an application online, and there was a bug and it couldn't submit it. And it's like, hey, so well, you can see it in the inspector. Not always, but sometimes you can get a message to pass back to someone who might be able to do something about it. And you'd never know that all that information is just sitting right there.
Well, and I've had clients who have sent me an email, something's not working on my website, and I realize it's in their browser. It's not everywhere. And I've never thought of using the inspector to figure out what's in their browser, but I'm not on their browser usually. But that would be something else yeah. It's a lot of ways it can be used. That's really good.
Yeah.
This is
Great.
kind of opening my eyes to the lighthouse and taking a look at that because we have problems on my website with page loads and stuff. So that's yeah.
With Lighthouse, it would be great because you can see things that are delaying, it could be, let's say you're using a third-party library for anything. Could be a carousel, could be cookies manager, could be for gpc, anything. And that script, it could potentially point out um, how much that's slowing down, and it can help you pin out, oh, we just added this new feature to the site. It was a third-party chat feature because we're offering a live chat option now. And running Lighthouse, if you kind of already have an idea of what's there, you can compare that report with past and be like, hey, this third-party chat we just added is things taking 2 seconds before it's totally blocking, it's not loading asynchronously. It can help you nail down potentially what issues are.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, I just was talking with Rory before. I just submitted a support ticket on an update, and there was a bad code in the CSS, and so I was able to find it, which was great, and just actually copied it and pasted it and shoved it into their support system. So.
Does anyone have any questions about what they looked at on the page and wish they knew if they could find any more information on it?
I have a question that might be a more general question, but wondering how you might use the inspector to simulate how a page would look in a different theme, if there's a easy way to do that.
So that's an interesting question. So in terms of a theme, so in the WordPress context, no. However, in the browser theme context, technically yes. Let's load up the Bootstrap site and reshare. Here, let's go back to the page. So in terms of a theme, this is let's go to inspect. And I should be able to, so these are the theme colors where I can, based off, I use a dark theme. So
Huh.
if I refresh, this will stay this way because we've set it. However, in this theme section, this will pull up. Automatic dark mode is what I'm using. But you can add theme styles or preferences here, and they'll load up here. So let's say, you just added a dark option to your site. You can just do it as that if your preferred option isn't that. And this could have been 100 more. So you could have been, let's say in this example, you have a theme and there's options for you've kept it all in one for some reason instead of making child themes. That's okay. And you're like, oh, because this client has several web properties, all the exact same, more or less. Well, they are the exact same in this scenario, like this Bootstrap site, but their color scheme's totally different. You've given them those options. You could use the inspector and then those styles, everything here, it all updates as if you selected it manually. So then where those
So you could try a different color scheme or a different set of colors.
if you've predefined them, yes.
If you've predefined them,
Correct,
yeah.
correct. The site, so a site just won't have a dark mode, which would be dope if the web was that great. But if you've predefined them, you could easily come through here. Let's say you define them, but you haven't given the option. You haven't created a selector for them yet. People have just been working on them. They've merged all the code. Oh, but hey, we need to still release that. Well, how can I look at it? Like, we need to review it. I need to see what's going on. We need to go through QA, or at least at a high level. Right here, it will give you the rendering emulation options that you've created, and you can toggle through them.
Is the building of those rendering options, those defining options, is that a tough thing to do right on the fly in there, or is there some macro code that you could use to pull right in to your inspector and have it ready?
You could, so technically yes, you could through the style editor of the style sheets that we shown previously, but you'd have to already have it kind of mm, yes, but that's not going to update that option. You would then do more stuff in the inspector. So the answer is kind of, but no, you wouldn't really do it in that sense. But that also could be an update that's later released, and as the way it's going, that could easily be an integration that it becomes easily accessible. There also could even be extensions already for that.
Thanks. Cool.
Sweet guys, let's give you back some of your night.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Of course,
thank you.
glad I can help.
Great.
I appreciate it. This is always good as part of the WordPress community. We all contribute in a way, and Rory, this has been very good.